You know, we tend to think of our neck as just, well, the thing that holds up our head, right? But what if I told you it's actually one of the busiest, most complex intersections in your entire body? Seriously, today we're going to explore the incredible biological engineering that's hiding right there in plain sight. Let's dive in.
So, it all starts with a really simple question. How do we talk? I mean, it feels totally effortless, but turning a single puff of air into a complex word is an absolutely amazing anatomical feat. And believe it or not, the command center for that entire operation, it's located right here in your neck. Okay, so our journey starts with the star of the show, the larynx. Most of us just call it the voice box. But honestly, calling it a box just doesn't do it justice. It's really more like a super sophisticated musical instrument built from cartilage, ligaments, and a bunch of incredibly precise little muscles. Now, at the very heart of this instrument is a critical component called the rima glottis. That's just the fancy anatomical name for the opening between your vocal folds. The absolute best way to picture it is like the aperture on a camera lens. It can open up super wide to let a ton of air rush in, or it can narrow down to this tiny little slit to carefully control exactly what gets through. And we can see this in action with its first big job, just breathing. When you're just sitting there, breathing normally, those laryngeal muscles are all relaxed, and that opening is just a narrow slit. But what happens when you need to take a big, deep breath before a run? Well, that's when a special set of muscles kicks in, contracting and pulling the vocal folds apart, throwing that aperture wide open so the air can just flood in. This is also where the magic of sound happens. To speak, you bring your vocal ligaments together just enough so that the air passing through makes them vibrate. But get this is the really cool part. When you whisper, you actually bring them together even tighter, but you leave just a tiny gap at the back. This lets the air rush through without making them vibrate, and that's what creates that unique, breathy sound. It's all about incredibly precise little adjustments. Okay, but how in the world do all those tiny muscles know exactly when to contract and relax with such precision? I mean, they're not acting on their own. They're all being controlled by this complex network of nerves, basically a super highway of information that's running right through your neck. And here's a fantastic rule of thumb if you ever want to understand the larynx. Almost every single one of those tiny intrinsic muscles, the ones doing all the fine-tuning for speaking and breathing, is supplied by a single nerve, the recurrent laryngeal nerve. It is the absolute workhorse of the voice box. But you know how it is in anatomy. A rule without an exception is, well, it's pretty rare. So out of all those tiny muscles inside the larynx, there is one rebel, one muscle that plays by its own rules and gets its nerve supply from somewhere totally different. Any guesses which one it is? And the rebel is, drumroll please, the cricothyroid muscle. So what makes this little guy so special? Well, for starters, it's the only one of these internal muscles you can actually see from the outside of the laryngeal cartilage. Its job is to tense the vocal folds, which is how you change your pitch when you sing or speak. And, crucially, it gets its instructions from a completely different nerve, a classic anatomical exception you just gotta love. So let's just zoom out for a second. Both of these nerves, the one for our rebel muscle and the one for all the others, are actually just branches of one of the biggest players in the nervous system, the vagus nerve. It basically splits its duties. One branch, the superior laryngeal, handles sensation. That's the thing that makes you cough when something goes down the wrong pipe. And it also gives power to our rebel cricothyroid muscle. The other big branch, the recurrent laryngeal, well, it takes care of all the other muscles.
But your neck isn't just about making sound, not even close. It is an unbelievably crowded commute for some of your body's most critical infrastructure. I'm talking about the power lines, the plumbing, and all the pathways that keep your brain and your entire upper body up and running.
Probably the most important passengers on this commute are the common carotid arteries. These are the main pipelines, the major highways delivering all that oxygen-rich blood from your heart right up to your brain and pretty much everything else in your head. Let's be clear, without them, nothing else works.
And nestled right where this main artery splits, there are two tiny but absolutely brilliant little sensors. First, you've got the carotid sinus. It's a baroreceptor, which means it senses blood pressure. If your pressure suddenly drops or spikes, this is what sounds the alarm. Right next to it is the carotid body, which is a chemoreceptor. Its job is to sense blood chemistry, specifically your oxygen levels. So you've got one for pressure, one for oxygen. Two different jobs, both totally vital for keeping your system perfectly balanced. And this is where things get really, really crowded. If you look at the scalene muscles on the side of your neck, you find this incredibly tight little passageway. The main artery for your arm and the entire bundle of nerves for your arm have to squeeze right between two of these muscles. It's wild. Everything has its own precise lane on this super packed highway.
So, how do anatomists even begin to make sense of all this complexity? Well, they do what any good city planner would do. They draw a map. They divide the neck up into these distinct neighborhoods, or as they call them, triangles, just to keep everything organized. The map is basically divided into two main zones. You've got a posterior triangle at the back and an anterior triangle at the front. The posterior triangle, which is bordered by big muscles like the trapezius and the sternocleidomastoid, that's where you find key nerves for your shoulder. But the anterior triangle? Whoa, that's the really busy downtown district. That's where you'll find the major arteries, veins, and the larynx itself. It's packed.
And within this map, there's a famous landmark you should know about. Right on the back edge of that big muscle we just mentioned, the SCM, there's a spot that's often called the nerve point of the neck. Think of it like a major junction box where this whole bundle of sensory nerves pops out to supply the skin of your neck and scalp. It's a super important spot. So after all that, it's pretty clear the neck deserves a little more appreciation, don't you think? It is truly one of the unsung heroes of the human body, just a masterclass in multifunctional design. Just think about it for a second. The neck is so complex that anatomists have to divide it into those two main triangles we saw, and then those are subdivided into even smaller ones, creating this detailed map of at least 4 unique, vital neighborhoods. It's incredible.
So the next time you think about your neck, I want you to remember it's so much more than just a connection. It houses the intricate machinery for your voice. It contains the superhighways for some of the most critical nerves in your body. It protects the main plumbing going up to your brain. And it anchors the muscles that let you move your head and even help you take a deep breath.
The neck really is a command center hiding in plain sight. It's a perfect intersection of structure and function, which, leaves us with a final thought. What other incredible marvels of engineering are we overlooking every single day in our own bodies?